Welcome to lesson 2. If you can open up lesson 2 Makesfile and we can begin. Let's quickly have a look at what we have in the scene. In the layers tab right over here, I've got a couple of layers that we can just work with. I have labeled one already, FP. This is where we're going to place all of our Forest Pack Pro items. I've got a lights tab right over there. Underneath here, I've got all these scattering objects. So we're going to scatter all these objects. I'm going to show you a couple of options, techniques, and of course all the settings. Next, we have scattering surfaces. So we've got a long one over here, got a square, and then two splines, and then a helix, just to show you some different variations. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go into the starter plane, this guy right over here. Step number 1, let's click FP right over there. And what's going to happen is once we click on it, we've got a couple of options over here. Number 1 is Forest Creation Library. So we can immediately select the library item or the preset that we want, and we're almost loading it up. So we can load it into the cache memory, and then we're going to unload it onto an object. Next, we have source objects, which we'll go through in a moment, and then we got mode. So now if it is under generate, what's going to happen is what you need to do is with generate, you can simply just click on your object over here. And as I click on it, the giant icon appears, which is perfect. It's to tell us that it has been loaded into the scene. The next thing you need to do is go into the modify tab right over there. Now the modify tab is going to immediately load up the Forest Pack Pro settings. So let's minimize all of these quickly, all these guys here. Now we already discussed in the first lesson that there's a lister. If I click on the lister now, you'll see that I've actually got Forest 001, and all the information is going to appear here once we actually start adding things to it. What's also recommended is we relabel these. It's going to help us in the long run when we have multiple Forest Pack items in our scene. So for now, let's actually just call this something like start, press enter, and what we can do over here is we can click the refresh button if nothing has refreshed. 1, 2, 3, click, and there we go, start. Using the list already, we can see we've got the name, so I can select it. I can switch it on and off, which really does help as well. This allows us to select the item we want, and we're going to see a whole bunch of information here a little bit later. So we'll dive through the lister bit by bit throughout this course. Let's close that for now. Okay, so we've got the Forest Pack Pro item, and remember we used the generate. So let's select our Forest Pack. Let's go underneath the geometry just for now. And right there, library. So now what we need to do is we actually need to select the preset that we want obviously onto this plane. So we can click on library. It's going to bring this up. You can choose any one that you want. For now, let's just go to lawns and choose Common Grass 01. So quick tip here, this little arrow right over there is going to allow us to increase or decrease the thumbnails, allowing us to see a lot better if there is something specific we want. For now, just choose Common Grass 01 Detail. You can double click this, or you can click the Load Selected button right over here. 1, 2, 3, click. Give it a few moments depending on how big the plane is. And as you do that, we can see this proxy looking model, and this is our actual Forest Pack. So there's a couple of settings that we need to do just to visually help us when we are working with Forest Pack, and at the same time to conserve a lot of CPU and GPU energy. So what I would like to do right now is just locate the display column right over there. Underneath display, just for now, and don't stress, we're going to go through all these settings. Right over there, we've got this as points cloud. I want you to select proxy, and as we select proxy, you'll see that everything was created, or rather converted, just in the viewport into one of these objects. So you can choose plain, pyramid, box, thin box, plant, or arrow. For example, if you choose plant, it looks pretty cool. I just prefer the pyramid, and remember this is going to save a lot of CPU and GPU energy. Okay, now we have added our Forest Pack item in here. This is where we can start manipulating everything. But before we do that, I'm going to delete this. What I'd like to do is go back to Forest Pack. I want to show you the other methods of creating this. We chose generate, and then I clicked on the object. What I'm going to do now is I'm simply just going to load the actual preset. So I'm not clicking on my item. I'm just going to click here. Then I'm going to choose my item. I'm going to choose load. So it's loaded now. If you look there, one model's selected. Now any item that I select, it is automatically going to load to it. So for example, I can actually choose this spline right over here. 1, 2, 3, click, give it a few seconds, and there it is there. If I go back into here, same settings. So let's delete that. Forest Pack again. Notice that it still has that model selected, which is really convenient because now I can just come here, I don't have to select it again, and I can select again on another spline. So the reason for this spline is to show you that it does work on curves and corners. Really awesome. Delete that. Forest pack still loaded. I'd like to show you here. So now this is a helix. Have a look what happens with the helix. Notice that it is not going up, so it is 2D. Okay, let's delete that a third time. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go into forest pack. So we've got this model selected. If you say select again, you can obviously choose another one. Alternatively, you can simply right click and it will actually remove the selection that you've preloaded into the actual library. Next, icon mode. If I choose icon mode, what that is going to do is I need to go into my viewport, click and drag. So what I'm doing is I'm creating the icon first, then I need to go into the modify tab, and then I can choose my library. All these methods are identical, just choose the one that you do prefer to do. Let's delete that. I've got one more option to show you. Underneath forest pack, there is one that says populate from selection. So now through this course you'll see that we can create a forest pack pro, and then we can add library items, preset items, but you can also select your own items, your own custom items. So for example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say populate from selection. I'm going to select these 3 items. So with these 3 selected, forest pack, you'll now see it says 3 objects selected. What I can do now is go underneath generate. I'm going to then select this object right here, and as I click on it, you'll see that that points cloud has just appeared. If yours doesn't look full, or maybe you don't even see anything on your plane, let's quickly go to the modify tab. What we need to locate is distribution, and as I click on distribution, we're going to have this setting right here called density. So again, don't stress, we're going to cover this a lot later on. For now, if you're only seeing one of these little objects or even nothing, scroll this down slowly until you start seeing it fill up nice and full. And remember, if your PC is starting to lag, just go underneath the display tab as I mentioned earlier, and what we can do there is we can actually change this to proxy, and it's a pyramid, and this is going to be a lot better for you. So don't forget those 2 functions straight away, they really are going to help. Okay, let's delete that. Let's go back to forest pack. So we've already discussed the generate the icon. We can select the library and preload it onto an object, or we can immediately populate from a selection of any items that we have selected, which is really awesome. Okay, let's actually create our very first forest pack item. So selecting forest pack, we can preload it. So I'm going to choose Common Grass 01. Feel free to use any one that you want. I'm going to click the load selected. Once that has loaded, we can now go through a couple of our settings. As usual, the first thing that I do like to do is just to go underneath the display tab. I go to proxy and just make these pyramids, and again that is just to save resources. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to activate a interactive render right over there, and we can start fiddling with this. The first thing to notice is that while the forest pack is selected, you cannot move it. Okay, that is not the way to actually move the forest pack item at all. What you need to do is you need to move the plane that is underneath. So let's select this plane, and this is where it's really good to have a system working for yourself. So I'm going to select the start plane, and if I move the actual plane, it immediately updates and corrects the forest pack pro, which is awesome. Which means at the same time, if I convert this to an editable poly and I select some of these vertices, you'll see that it immediately updates, which is really awesome. And the same concept is if I delete anything here, just like that, it updates as well. Really awesome. Okay, let's backtrack all the way. And the next thing to know is that if you delete the plane, for example, like that, it will delete the forest pack item as well, because obviously you've deleted what the forest pack needs to be on. Hiding it is okay. So for example, if we just scroll up a little bit and zoom in, you can see the plane right over there. What we can do is just right click. You can go to object properties and you can say renderable, so you take that off the actual plane and click the OK button, then it will not render in your scene, so completely up to you. Okay, let's backtrack. Let's put that guy back where it started. So underneath the general tab, we have presets. Now, this preset function here is actually outdated. It's not something that we use in the latest versions of Forest Pack Pro. The reason this is still here is just to keep for compatibility reasons. So if you are still using presets, what that means is that you can come inside your Forest Pack Pro item, you can save the preset. When I say preset, I'm talking about some of these functions over here. Now it's important to know that some settings do not get saved. The transform fallout, the distribution maps, the paint areas, clipping, some surfaces, and that is because if you're saving a preset that is built for a certain terrain, that will never work on, let's say, a flat plane or something that is completely different. In the event that you do want to use presets, it's very simple. You'd come inside here. You can simply type anything that you want. You say test, for example. We're going to save that preset, save all parameters. You can say yes. This one will delete it. This will export, and that will import the preset. So for example, if you are creating and you've created a very beautiful preset and you want to use that on another machine, or you want to obviously share that with a colleague, you can save the preset and then give it to your colleague and they will use it. Just bearing in mind it is technically old technology and we don't really use the presets anymore. So let's quickly stop this render over here. We've got the icon size. So the icon size is actually very simple. It is simply just the size of the actual icon when we are creating a Forest Pack Pro item. The random seed allows us to randomly generate the actual forest pack. So if we get a good view there and I increase this or decrease that number, it is just a randomized version of it. So if you have got the Forest Pack Pro item in your scene and you don't like the way that it looks, just feel free to randomly change this number and you'll get a different variation of it. CPU threads, just leave it as it is. It's defining how many threads are used. Really recommended you don't change any of that. The log level refers to the level of detail information that Forest Pack Pro logs and records during its operations. Next, we have this button over here. This is to check for any updates. This is the help button. This button right over here is the forest lister, exact same as clicking that button right over there. This one over here gives you the stats on the actual forest pack. Next over here is the settings or the global settings. Now this one can be good for streamlining your work, because what you can do here is, as you see all of these menus, if you know that you don't want to use some of the menus and you want to streamline your workflow, you can simply deactivate some of these menus. For example, the about. I'm never going to use the about section, so I can untick that, click the OK button. Now at first it's still there. All you really have to do is just go into one tab and into the other, and then you'll see the about tab is gone. So that's just to streamline your workflow.